He's going to be a few minutes. Yeah. All right, we're ready to go. Good afternoon and welcome to the February 19th Special Committee of the Whole meeting. And the City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nation and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. Well, welcome to everybody. It's nice to see all the smiling faces. We're going to start with a report. Mrs. Keeler, if you would, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So today's Committee of the Whole is about affordable housing, and we're hoping to get some dialogue going at the council level, but also get some direction on next steps. So council has established affordable housing as one of its key strategic objectives for its term. We did provide a report at a committee in May, but we recognize that was quite early in everyone's term, and we hadn't really solidified a strategic implementation plan at that time. So it's timely at this point to get some more discussion going at council, but also get some more direction on what steps you would like to take as a council and what the sequence of those steps would be. So this report basically clarifies where the city is today in terms of its regulations and provides some options, certainly not all of them, I'm sure, for council to start the discussion. And basically what we've done in this case is try to explain the differences between formal affordable housing and more attainable housing that wouldn't necessarily meet our definitions in our bylaw, but certainly provides more diverse options for folks that would essentially be less expensive than the traditional single-family home. And so the recommendation from staff is just to receive, but we are hoping to get some resolutions from council at a later council meeting, but they can be discussed as recommendations to council in committee today.
Just push the right button, I'll be doing the right job, I suppose. I need a mover and a seconder for receipt of the report. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Greer. Discussion. Wide open for conversation here on this. That's the whole purpose of today. So if you would, who wants to start this off? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, through your worship. So I appreciate that everyone feels we need affordable housing, and this is one of our strategic, out of the 5 points that we are looking at as a city in this term. But I have some concerns that perhaps we don't need affordable housing as we may see it right now, that we may have needed it. And so I've done a lot of research, and if stats are brought forward today that contradict what I understand, that's great. But I kind of think right now we need to rethink our strategic plan about affordable housing as a priority. I think we have a few things. The census right now is from 2016, and 2020 will be coming out. But I think one of the main things for me is that we have a lot of housing coming forward right now. I'd asked planning, and I believe our CAO forwarded all of those stats to all of council for multifamily units, all sorts of different, whether it be affordable and just regular housing. So there are at least almost 1,000 units right now that are either in process, in some form in process, and that doesn't mean that there aren't others that are still going to be coming, and half of them are rental. And out of this, we have quite a few affordable rentals for people in Parksville, especially for seniors. And I guess some of the other things that concern me are that I think it's, I really have a problem having purpose-built affordable housing as opposed to affordable housing that is allocated to throughout different units, different apartments and housing options throughout the city. And I think the city itself has many incentives for builders to encourage affordable units within their builds. And I think that's a really doable thing. And I just want to share that for me personally, I do understand there is a bit of a stigma. I have a personal experience as a single mom raising a young boy. I had to live in subsidized housing. I had subsidized rent, and I was in a brand new job that paid minimum wage. I had no car. And in order to live in this building and gain some self-sufficiency, I had an hour bus ride, which I did with my suitcase to the airport on my 4-day trips, and I did it. And so I don't really, I didn't want to stay in that building forever. Let's just put it that way. I found that as nice as it was and as nice as the people were, and there is a little bit of a stigma to it. So I think it's much better off to have interspersed housing throughout. And I also think that one of the biggest things that, rather than having purpose-built affordable housing, there are rent subsidies from the BC government. They're safer for seniors, and there's RAP, Rental Assistance Program for Low-Income Families. There are social programs that do help people so that they can top up their income. I believe it's under $40,000. And I think that, you know, any businesses that are able to should be paying their employees a better wage if they're able to. Because I do feel that it's a little bit unfair for a city to have to subsidize in affordable housing if a business can pay more for that. I also think that we have Berwick possibly might come back to the table. We don't know. There's just so many things in the works right now that I think we need to put a pause on everything and just rethink how we want a big vision for Parksville before we just build. So I have many more things, but I'll turn this over to other people.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, Berwick, we can kind of discount that as affordable housing. I don't think anybody will be there that needs help. However, I think in general in this community, and I know from experience of knowing all the business people in town, it's very difficult to get help here because of housing. And the help that we do have are all coming from Nanaimo. So if you're talking about climate change and saving gasoline and so on, it doesn't help when everybody has to travel a long way to get to work. So I think if we're going to be able to maintain our businesses in town, we should have the people living in town. And I've never lived in affordable housing, and so I don't know too much about what it's like to live there. But I can understand that if people can't afford housing, there should be a place for them, and there should be help for them. So I think there are many different avenues that we can go to help people. And from our mayor's round table, I think it was evident that most of the people wanted us to do something on affordable housing. So that's one of our issues for this coming year and the years to follow. So I think we have to take a long look at and not just disregard it because there's 1,000 units being built. Most of these rentals places that are being built are going to be far too expensive for people who are just working in the downtown area or working at minimum jobs. So with that, I'll leave it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is, when we consider the amount of existing affordable housing that Parksville already has, or is currently in the construction stages, it is clear that we are already well served with far more affordable units than communities of similar size, as well as a very progressive policy. Sorry, move my place here. Communities of similar size, as well as a very progressive policy to promote more affordable housing being built by the development community. The staff reports have been very extensive and giving us numbers of existing affordable units that we already have in Parksville and those that are already under construction, as well as our policies that we have that allow for the building of affordable housing. You know, currently we've been successful. Kingsley Manor, Hustwick Place, Orca Place, as well as all of the new construction projects such as the Insight development up on Despard Apartments, up on Despard Road, have a number of 28, I believe, is affordable rental units that are already being built right now, actually getting pretty close to completion. And they have all been created, and they've been created with taxpayer assistance for DCC exemptions, permissive tax exemptions, and in the case of Orca Place, a substantial land donation as well that provided 52 units just down the road here on Corfield. The BC housing policy of supplying the buildings for a block of affordable rental units, in my opinion, is flawed. Similar to what Councillor Wilson was referring to is the fact that it's flawed in the fact that concentrating all low-income individuals in a development it's antiquated, and it stigmatizes those individuals living there. It really does, and is reminiscent of the projects that was all built back in the 70s. Having affordable rental units included in a mixed housing development is the preferred social strategy for housing initiatives. We have the necessary strategies in place already at the City of Parksville here to encourage inclusion of affordable units by the developers in our city without including donations as land as incentives as well. So these incentives are already in place and they're working. The developers are using it. So, you know, as Councillor Wilson also said as well, our current provincial government, included in their election promises, platform, a plan to send subsidy checks to those individuals that meet the criteria to live in existing market rental units, which would be probably more economical feasibly in the long run than getting land and building buildings at the same time. So this is a far better way of doing it, and plus not actually segregating a segment of our population that are in need of assistance at this time of their lives and putting them all in housing that contains only those that need assistance. So I believe it's far better to rely on the plans that we already have in place. I'm against land donation by the City of Parksville, the City of Parksville donating land for it. I'm very much against that because that just sends the total wrong message, because the thing is that city land was purchased by taxpayers once again. So the thing is that that adds to it. In the case of Orca Place, it was we made the best of the situation as it was presented, but I don't not favor that at all, because the thing is that with the DCCs and the permissive tax exemptions that follow any affordable land housing strategy, those taxes are forever forgiven on that property for as long as it remains affordable housing. So the taxpayers have already put this up. So the thing is by giving the land away, type of thing, is giving away the city assets. And some of those city assets have been purchased with other reasons in mind. And it's just, to me, it's the wrong play. So I believe that our policies are very well thought out, and they are working. And I believe that that's what we do without donating any land. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree with a lot of the comments made around the table already. I'm just going to add some of my personal thoughts on that too. Councillor Greer mentioned, you know, business owners. I currently have 12 people on my payroll. 5 of those count as a low-income wage earner. And out of those 5, 4 of them don't live here in Parksville. They live in the surrounding area because Parksville rent is too high. If we could have rental subsidies and everything in place, or that work with a 30% of someone's income, and that way it works. But I don't believe it's the city's responsibility to look at housing. I really strongly believe that we have a lot of policy initiatives in place that are existing. 15-year rental building, purpose-built. In 2012, when I was going back, and that Hustwick Place put 33 units, and that was with the Lions group. I believe that they've done 2 other projects in the community, and that as well, the one on Hearst and Kingsley Manor as well. Last year, we saw a building development come before us. It hasn't, their shovels aren't in the ground or anything, but in the resort area, looking for, that would build accommodation for resort workers. And that's, so again, close by to resort community, at a fair rental rate. Like Councillor Wilson mentioned about living in co-op or other type facilities, I personally believe that we have organizations like the Lions or Habitat for Humanity that we can should help and work with partnering, because we do allow DCC waivers and like I said, other policies and that are already in place. And I think the partnerships would be welcome, or would be welcomed by me personally anyway. As I said, I don't believe the city's in the right mode for building or large-scale land donation. So, but if I could pose a question to our CAO through you, the Mayor, on whether we've had anything in the last year in our building permits that has taken advantage of any of the initiatives for the city in low-income or rental accommodation.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Patterson, yes, we have. There was an extensive list sent to Council in email, which we can certainly get that information up on the website, but there has been multiple, as Councillor Wilson mentioned. I'm not sure if the building permits were all issued in the last year, but there's certainly development permits, rezoning applications, some building permits. A lot of them are at different stages. So off the top of my head, I don't have the stats there, but it seems like Councillor Wilson has the email. It is, definitely something that people take advantage of, in different, there's all different things that we do. So we have permissive taxes for established housing units. We have, as you mentioned, many other policies. And so, yes, I would say the answer is yes, we have had that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some comments again, and I appreciate all the talk around the table. There's some valid reasons to look at building or not building. I myself, I like to really look at the whole affordable housing thing as a big envelope, and it could be a whole series of things. I think meeting in the middle is the important thing with all of with the whole process of affordable housing. I'm not crazy about the government-assisted affordable housing just because there's a lot of restrictions and so on, but where I am really keen to get involved is the groups like Habitat. I like co-op housing structures, co-op housing rental, co-op housing ownership structures. And I myself was a co-op housing person in the younger years. It was a way for me to get on my feet. And, when you look at after-tax dollars here, what young people and parents that are looking after grandkids because of some unfortunate circumstances with their own kids, things like daycare alone just eat up a paycheck. One repair on a vehicle for a sensor that you had no idea was in the car for $1,500 and a set of tires for $1,200. It just goes on and on. So I guess my largest concern overall is making sure that when we look at the population of Qualicum and the population of Parksville, really high on the scale, number 1 and 2, I think, believe, of the oldest population in this area of all of British Columbia. So my concern is folks that are living in trailers currently and just making it by on subsidy income or senior citizen wages that come in, fixed income. So I would really like to see senior affordable housing be a main priority, as well as looking at all other sectors at the same time in a fair structure. But I really think after seeing and reading up about a location that was just being reviewed to be built for seniors, I thought it was a really wonderful idea, and I thought that's a category that we're going to have to make sure we look after that population. It's going to be very large numbers that we're dealing with, and especially in our area. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Everybody's had their chance to speak. So I'm going to speak on this. You want to speak first? All right, go, feel free.
Thank you. I am surprised to hear that some people say that affordable housing isn't needed in this area. That's the first time that I've heard that opinion come out of it. Through this last couple of years, when we've reached out to the public, this is where we got the objective of doing affordable housing. These were community-driven priorities, and we see the impacts of it, like you mentioned, through businesses and families struggling to get by. So this isn't just a council idea that we thought this might be a good idea to try to go with. These were brought forward by our community. We look at land being used for many different ways to support the community, whether it's through childcare initiatives. We've done it before with housing, like you mentioned, with Orca Place. And I'm a little bit surprised as well to hear your opinion on it, particularly because Councillor Bryan, yourself and myself, we appeared as a delegation to the previous council where we requested for them to look at doing affordable housing options. It was one of my campaign promises, to listen to the community and respond to those needs. And so it's why, to me, affordable housing is an important part of it, that we look at how we can implement it. I really appreciate staff having this report so it could outline what affordable housing, how we define that in our area, and to see them equate $1,100 a month as the amount defined as affordable housing. It's quite an expensive rent. I have a hard time even seeing that as being affordable for a lot of families, especially if you are on minimum wage in our community. I do like how some of the options that staff outlined for us to consider, things like possible caps on contributions. So if we are donating land, we can perhaps look at amending how the DCCs are going to be, whether they're waived or if we have a cap for them. I think some of these suggestions here in the report is definitely worth us looking at and hammering out, because maybe we need to be making those adjustments for affordable housing. But I'd just like to say I am surprised to hear that some people think we don't need affordable housing, because I do see it as an important issue. Thanks.
Thank you. I will take my turn now, if you don't mind. Sorry. First off, I too am very surprised that people think that we don't need affordable housing. Secondly, to use numbers that are totally misleading is almost to the point of, I just can't even come up with the words for it, sorry. First off, there are 400 apartments being built or have been permitted to be built in the city of Parksville right now, of which 25%, so less than 100 of those apartments, are actually classified by provincial termination as being affordable housing. Now, the provincial definition of affordable housing is a little bit deceiving. It is basically established upon 30% of the median wages in this town. And in this town, it works out to be $1,167 for a one-bedroom apartment. You would need to be making $25 an hour to make that rent 25 or 30% of your income. So these people that are making $16, $17, $18, $20 an hour, $21 an hour, what do we tell them? Go move somewhere else because we don't want to have those rents lower than this? I'll just give you a quick example. I was talking to a young lady here just, oh God, within the last few days, and she's gone back to school to improve herself. She's taking a course where they work with senior citizens. And when she's finished, she's expecting to get $20 an hour as a wage, working in one of these units like Stanford Place or, you know, Berwick and Qualicum Beach and that. So it's about $20 an hour is what she's going to make. She could not afford to live in one of these one-bedroom apartments based on that 30%, based on that salary. So yes, it is affordable housing for that middle income, $25, $30, $35 an hour, whatever that may be. But at the end of the day, I am more interested in the young families, the single-parent families that are making $18 and $20 an hour that can't afford. You know, they're one day away from eviction when it comes to that. Or they have to start making hard decisions whether to buy food or pay the rent on time. That is not fair. We need to be having affordable housing. Now, to throw up the idea of, oh my gosh, we don't want to have these Toronto-type segregation units where everybody living in there and it's going to be a slum-type business. That's not what this is about. Come on, folks. This is about nice places. We have a number of them already in town that are based on 30% of your incomes. So, you know, are we saying those are terrible places like was being mentioned? And we need to be looking at this as to what we as a city can do. I'm surprised that some are flopping and flipping on this when it wasn't more than 6 months ago. Everybody was in favor of donating land. We, in fact, all got in a van and drove around and looked at the city properties and said, well, we could do something with that, and we could donate that, and we can sell that. But now all of a sudden, because it's politically different, we are changing our minds on this. I find that disgusting. People in Parksville, the lower income people in Parksville need to be taken care of. And that's what we have to do. As far as being against donations, the land that we're looking at is sitting there doing nothing. It's not gaining any revenue for the city of Parksville. It is the land that we're talking about. There's 2 or 3 pieces. Those lands aren't generating anything for this city. They're not parkland. They're nothing other than a piece of property that costs the city on an annual basis to maintain. Why not make it into something that would be good for the people of Parksville? I'm sorry, but I don't understand this attitude towards all of a sudden affordable housing. We've got enough. We don't have enough. We'll have enough when the people don't have to be looking over. Our vacancy rate before we took power here was under 1%. And now, hopefully, it's going to go to 4 or 5% vacancy. That will help reduce the rents in the middle income. But the bottom ones, it's going to depend on what we put in. And yes, it is waiving DCCs. Yes, it is tax exemptions. And yes, the Parksville citizens are contributing towards that. But I don't think anybody is complaining to that extent. And if they are, I'd certainly like to know about it. Because at the end of the day, even waiving DCCs, that's a fallacy to think that it's costing you money. It's not. It's not costing you any more money than anything else in this city is happening. So I'm just shocked and dismayed at the attitude around the table now that says affordable housing should be put off, should be. No, we're just starting to roll the ball down the hill. Why would you stop it now? We've been fighting for it since I was in power the last time, trying to get affordable housing into this. And now you're turning around and saying, no, stop it. It's starting to work, so you don't want it to work, so stop it. No, we need it to keep going. We need to put more units on here. We need to draw young families. We need to draw into town those people that can work at anywhere from $15 to $25 an hour wages, because that's what they're going to achieve in this town at this point in time. So let's look at this more reasonably, and let's make it so that the people of Parksville have a place to live. They don't have to go to Nanaimo or Coombs or Arrington to live, because once they move there, we lose them as part of our workforce. So thank you. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Greer.
Thank you, through your mayor, your worship. So from my perspective, I didn't say we didn't need affordable housing, because I don't know yet that we would need it, because we have so many new builds coming through. We have almost 1,000, half of them are rentals. And so my feeling is that we should stop and pause for a while until we see how these units are filled. The other thing that I feel that works as an alternative to purpose-built affordable housing is to have affordable units throughout other buildings. We have lots of incentives for that. And I believe there is something in the staff report that says if builders are, we can waive the DCCs, as is happening at the Insight property. So if builders don't want to, or we can't get enough of them, we could possibly put in a bylaw that I think was tried once upon a time to insist that so many affordable units be put in new builds. So that is an alternative. That's not saying we're not going to build affordable units. So, to twist it around and say that we don't need them or that we're against it, that's not the issue. It's how it's done is the real issue here. And there are other ways of doing it. There are other ways of encouraging developers to come and build co-ops, which I totally believe in. It's a great way to get affordable housing. And yes, Habitat's another way, but that is home ownership. And I also just want to point out that there are people of my era who, when we started out, we shared. We were minimum wage and we shared with other people. It's not an unheard of concept when people are starting out. And the other thing that we must remember is that there are rent subsidies. They're out there for people who are at minimum wage. So it's not that you're throwing them out and saying, you can't, too bad, you can't live here. People do have the option to apply for those subsidies. So it's really, the point here is, how are we going to get affordable housing here? And it doesn't necessarily have to come from giving land away, which I don't think we should be giving our minimum amount of land that we do own right now. If anything, I would be leasing land. I think it's unsustainable economically to forgive DCCs and permissive tax and permit fees. I just don't think a community can sustain that. And I also want to point out that besides the lease that the city has with affordable units, there are other, through the Lions, there's Gillingham Estates, Lions Pioneer Village, the 49er. And so really, they're right now, not counting places like Trillium, Stanford Place, Aerosmith, Koki Care Homes, and Emerald Estates, we have 250 affordable units for seniors and families right now in the city. So that's all. It's not an either or we don't need it. I just think, from my perspective, I like to get a long-term vision of where we're going in this community. And we now have a real build going on here again, which we haven't seen in years. So let's wait just a bit. We can look at it in 6 months and see what happens. Thank you.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I think we have to determine what's affordable, and that means something different for everyone. Somebody can afford to pay $1,100 a month, some can afford to pay $1,800, some can only afford $600, and some can't afford hardly anything. So there's a big variety when we talk about affordable housing. It doesn't fit one classification. And over the years that I've been on council, I have had, and it's not just some of the young people that are working for minimum wage. What's affected mostly is probably women with 2 or 3 children, and they have a difficult time making ends meet. So what's affordable to them is hardly any rent at all. And the other thing that I've had numerous people phone me, seniors who are on old age pension, and that's all. They don't have a government pension, they don't have a company pension. And I've had numerous phone calls, I would think dozens of phone calls, saying that if we raise the taxes $5 more, their rents would go up $5 more, they'll be on the street. So we have to think about a variety of people here. It's not just, affordable is a word that we all throw around. Affordable means something very much different to many, many people. And it includes mostly the young people, probably on minimum wage, but it also includes the young parent that's got 2 or 3 children, and it also includes older people who are not on big pensions. But the need is out there, and we should strive to help the people in our area and keep the people in our area. Thanks.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. As rebuttal of somewhat, I will address first, Councillor Fraz decided to bring up the fact that himself and myself, we appeared as a delegation regarding Orca Place in these early stages and so forth. And just to refresh Councillor Fraz's memory, as I recall, we were here as a delegation to attempt to change the housing project from a supportive housing project into an affordable rental housing project. And that the idea was that it was already a done deal at that particular point, so we were trying to make the best out of a bad situation. So that is indeed why I was there appearing as a delegation, knowing full well that the supportive housing wasn't as attractive to the community as maybe an affordable rental housing. So therefore, I wasn't saying that all of a sudden I was for an affordable rental housing. I was just trying to make the best out of a bad deal. It didn't work out that way, and I'm the first one to admit here in front of a full crowd that Orca Place is up and running as a supportive housing project, and they're doing a very fine job. And I'm very proud of what they've done, very much so. And we'll continue to support them any way we can. Regarding the mayor's comments about we went on a tour of city-owned property, which was correct, and I remember that very well. It wasn't that long ago, but I'm sorry to differ from your opinion. I was on a tour to educate ourselves as what was actually owned as city-owned property and what the zonings were in place and what the possible applications could be for those properties. I was there to understand how that property was purchased, why it was purchased, and what it could possibly use for, and if it could be disposed of in a more favorable manner, but keeping an open mind the entire bus ride and afterwards as well, and certainly not making any decisions on a bus that would be perfect for affordable housing, because that's not where you make those decisions. So that's the reason I was on that bus tour, so I'm sorry that it differs than your own. The other thing is that I also heard that the businesses in town are complaining that they can't get workers because they pay minimum wage and nobody can afford to live here. And I don't disagree with that, and I really understand that whole thing. But the thing is that reality is, if those businesses expect the taxpayers of Parksville, the existing people that are here, to subsidize rentals for their employees so they can continue to pay them a minimum wage instead of a fair wage, so that they could actually live in the city of Parksville, then I don't think that's right. I don't think it's up to taxpayers to do that. But here's what I would be willing to do, is work with our planning department to suggest that any of the new construction, as has been mentioned over on Resort Drive, one of the applications are asking for it to be included in their plan purpose-built employee housing that's going to be built on site as well. It's going to be built by the owner, the developer of that property, but they are, in fact, they're guaranteeing themselves employees because they're giving them as a benefit, I would suspect, subsidized housing so that they can live there but also work there and afford to. So there's a case where the businesses are actually providing benefits to attract employees here. If you want employees, you got to pay more than minimum wage if you want to get them from other places. As another business explained to me already, I said, how are you going to relocate to Parksville? Because everybody has a hard time getting employees right now. There's an employee shortage. And he says, I never have a problem getting employees. I said, why is that? He says, because of my benefit program, I treat my people well, and he says, and they don't want to work anywhere else. So the thing is that they will do the commute from Nanaimo to work here because it's a better place to work. So the thing is that that's great. That's excellent thinking from a management point of view. So I would be willing to work with our planning department to say any new builds that happen for any businesses. I don't care if it's fast food restaurant. I don't care if it's a car wash. The thing is that if there is opportunity to explain to that owner that they can build on that same site as their car wash or fast food place, purpose-built housing for their employees. And that way they can pretty well have an assured supply, because if you're working for me, you get a chance to live in that apartment upstairs, and if you don't work for me, well, you're not going to be living there. So it puts the onus on the business owner himself and not be subsidized by the taxpayers of Parksville. Thank you.
I'm not sure I like following Councillor O'Brien. I'll just put it out there. Because as an employer, I have health and dental benefits. I do not pay anyone minimum wage. My youngest employee is 15 years old, and she still makes $14.75, which is low, but this is her first job. So I'm just going to put that out there, that there's a lot of employers in this community that do pay their employees a higher wage than minimum wage. With gratuities and such, most of my employees are at $19 an hour. It's still not enough. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the Affordable Housing Action Plan and some of the analysis that staff have given us. And this goes back to May of last year, of 2019. So as you can see, we've had a lot of change in this community in the last year. But I'm going to point out two of the points that I think that maybe we need to start thinking about some of the analysis and what we're going to do moving forward. And that's so. One of them was, may wish to consider its position with respect to the following: disposing of lands to nonprofit groups for reduced or no cost provided an acceptable number and format of affordable housing units is being provided. I fully agree. And that I'm going to go back to my first time around the table, working with groups that do this work. The Lions Group, just because they're really great in our community, so that's why they always come to mind. Habitat for Humanity, even some of our builders and everything in this community. The RDN has programs as well for low income, and Parksville has some really great policies as well. But B was disposing of lands to for-profit groups for reduced or no cost, providing an acceptable number and format of affordable housing is being developed. And this will require a fair and open process through requests for bids from interested companies. So those are two of the items that I'd really kind of like to concentrate on and to think about, and to not have another year go by. We're towards the end of February, so it's been a good 10 months since this first report came out. So I really do feel that to expand the current program, there's a line item. There's always a line item. It's a budget amount. And that's what we need to think about, is if we're moving forward and that we're going to start going into budget deliberations again very soon, and there needs to be a line item and that for that purpose. And what does that look like? And do we need to expand our current program? And if so, by how much? And what does that look like in a taxation increase? Because that's what it ends up occurring. It's a taxation increase. And that, so as a council person at this table, we can go round and round and round, but I think we need to pick something and concentrate and kind of go back and look at some of the analysis. There was 6 different points and that, so this is a start. I'll let more discussion occur.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to carry on from what Councillor Patterson was saying, this is a start. I think this is, in my eyes, it's a 5-year plan. I'm really interested in what we're all saying around this table, but I want to know what you're all saying. And when we start to understand what the community needs, which we've already heard, and you know, with a great amount of impact, that's been one of the major issues in the election format and the mayor's roundtable, and a lot of discussions on Facebook. So my whole scenario is I'd like to see something happening now, next year, the year after, 5 straight years of an initiative to get things rolling and working forward so that we have a project rolling out every year. And I think that's going to start to eat up a bit of the need that is going to continue to come at us. It's things aren't changing. It's going to get more expensive to live. It's going to get more expensive to buy a house, which is really the ultimate of where the rents sit for everybody that's in these houses. And so suddenly they get knocked out of there because the house is sold and they're looking for rental. They are just dumbfounded by the amount of money that they're going to pay. And I think in some cases it's a staggering amount, and in some cases it's not doable for some of these families with kids, you know, especially people with 3-4 kids and so on, right? So anyways, that's my thought. I'd just love to see something rolling where we continue as opposed to trying to parachute housing into one big scenario. Just a nice steady flow of affordable. Thank you.
Anybody else at this point? We have about 10 minutes before we move into the next session. So we've got just a couple of real quick points here. First off, when we started this conversation, it was started by the people of Parksville. It wasn't started by the council. The people of Parksville, the 100 people that we had from all walks of life were at that meeting. They told us it was actually the #1 item on their list. When you look at all the different things that they said that were important to them, it was the #1 item, was affordable housing. And it wasn't affordable housing for the fact that you could afford to buy a $400,000 house or a $500,000 house. It was affordable housing for the people, for their kids, for their young families to move into our town. Our biggest problem we have here right now is the fact that we don't have enough young families. And I'll just give you a real quick example of what that's about. 27% of our population is between the ages of 20 and 55 years old. 27%. In the province of British Columbia, that average is 47%. So we have a significantly lower amount of workforce-sized families, or aged families, rather. So that is the reason why most of the people around here can't find employees to work in their stores. But, you know, is it because they're minimum wage? Wages are paid based on what the employers can afford to pay in most cases. If we could all afford to pay $50 an hour, then we would all pay $50 an hour if that would solve the employment problems. We all pay, all the employers in Parksville that I know of anyways, all the bigger employers, all pay benefits. They all pay all of those types of things. So it's not like Teresa does and I don't, and Adam does, and Doug doesn't. You know, it's everybody pays to some extent the benefits for their employees. So that's it. We're not talking about costing the taxpayers of Parksville money out of it so that there's an increase in taxes by this. That's a fallacy. It's not true. If that were the case, then you would have already seen that as a tax increase instead of the 2.5% tax increase that you're going to see for this upcoming year. So it is, in fact, yes, we do waive DCCs, but those DCCs are done on a long-term calculation that stretches out for 20, 25 years, and if I sat here and tried to explain it, we'd all be asleep before I got finished. But the reality is it's just a calculation based on an OCP, that's the official community plan, and it really doesn't reflect the reality of it. It's no different than if a particular piece of property was zoned for a four-story building and only a two-story building was built. The difference that is being missed in DCCs doesn't come out of the taxpayers' funds. So at the end of the day, it's not an increase in taxes. So let's take that right off the table, okay? It is every 5 years we would go back and reevaluate the DCCs based on what the future growth of the city is at that particular point in time. So let's when we talk about it, let's talk about it clearly. Councillor Chandler is absolutely right. Councillor Patterson has some very strong points as well in the fact that we need to have a plan. That's what this is all about. That's what this conversation is about, is to develop a plan for the next few years. We can't just keep going around willy-nilly and looking at it, although I don't think we have. In fact, there hasn't been anything that's come up other than the one particular piece of property for rezoning. But other than that, we're not looking at, we haven't come up to council and said, let's vote on whether we're going to approve giving this particular piece of property away or not. But it has to be looked at. We have to get the price of these developments down for lower income families, for people with disabilities, for senior citizens, for young single parent families, and on and on. All the people that are in the low income side, we have to make sure that we can take care of these people so that they stay in the city of Parksville. They're just as important to us as the people that live in the $700,000 or $800,000 houses, and we need to take care of them. So, having said that, I think we're going to wrap this up in about 2 minutes. Pardon me? Yeah, we're at 2:54, so we only have 1 minute. You've got 1 minute. If you can say it in 1 minute, you say.
Thanks, Your Worship. Victoria just announced yesterday that it has the third highest market rental location, is now the third highest market rental location in Canada. So the thing is that Victoria got the third highest rates all as compared to Canada. So the thing is that we cannot control market trends. It would all be well and good if we could make the buildings more affordable, but it's impossible, especially at our level. We're a municipal government type of thing, and that's certainly not in our mandate. But the other thing is you made up a very good point about, talked about the business that was going to put up a 2-story or a 3-story. Well, what if we offered incentives to that developer that says, hey, listen, if you put in a 3rd story, we're going to give you some incentive that you can actually add a 3rd story into that building. You've already got the land, you're going to go up, it's not going to cost you any more for land. So put incentives in place that developer can say, add a 3rd story, or where applicable, add a 4th story, for as long as it's included as affordable housing. Give some incentives to the developer to do it.
Well, first off, just real quick, we do have that plan, and it is in place, and we do give incentives for increased density. So let's move on to the question. If it's for me, don't answer it. All right, 5 minutes. Any questions from the audience? Norm, please. Thank you. Okay. One more point. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I was one of those 100 people at the round table, and I do not agree with the city subsidizing with land. That's number one. So there were other people there that didn't agree with that. But second of all, I'd like council to very carefully consider that there are so many people who do own property in Parkstone that are living on very fixed income, and that tax increases, and there will be tax increases as we continuously are subsidizing through DCC, through property taxes, etc. There will be tax increases, and they can't afford it. And so why we're talking about we're going to subsidize these people on one side because they're renters, we're forgetting all about the people who are property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Wait, pardon me? We have to cut it off, yes. My timekeeper is telling me that we now have to move on to our next part. So, 2 minutes?
We need 5 minutes to skip.
Okay, 5 minutes? Okay. Pardon me? We did, didn't we? Oh, okay, sorry. I thought we did. It was Counselor, yes. We'd take a vote. We'd take a vote. All in favor of receiving the report? Okay, fair enough. Moving on. Do we have to adjourn? I don't think so. No, let's go. Okay. So apparently we're working on stopping the one camera and setting it up for the next meeting. So it'll just take a couple minutes to get that organized, and away we go.